All right. Good evening, everyone. I apologize. Too much rain. I have to drive all the way from my home. If I seem a little bit off, I just came from New York like 4 hours ago. So
Jet lag?
yeah. And what?
It's a jet lag?
Yeah, the 2 hour difference. Yeah, yeah. But that's correct. So, what are we studying today?
Why don't you tell us about your trip?
Let's see. It's good. It is good. Yes.
We didn't really do activity 6, the SQLite CLI.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that you were saying. Um. All right. So you guys are on SQLize already. So what do you guys think about SQLize? Huh?
Probably a lot easier, but just kind of.
Probably a lot
When
easier.
you're not here.
What is it?
We don't like when you're not here.
So let's do. I know you guys are missing one activity. Let's do a quick recap. I'll do one of the activities. I'll start with 7. It's very similar to the 6th one. We'll just do a recap and make sure we understand SQLize. So what's the just as a concept? What's the definition? What is SQLize? Anybody? Yes, Basim.
Have access to database functions using JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Let you create, post, put, delete, all from your JavaScript.
Okay, excellent. And what is all that thing called? CRUD, yeah. But the concept that you have some library in front or an API in front of your database that is letting you access all those functions. What is that thing called? ORM. All right. So that's what an ORM is: object relational mapping. Right. It kind of provides you a functionality. But behind the scenes, we understand that eventually those are SQL queries. Right. If you open up the documentation, if you open up the functions, you will see those are literally queries that are building upon based on what you're passing in. Remember, we did ORM on Saturday, so we were creating some functions and we were passing stuff in, and then we were eventually creating a query: select star from this table, these columns, and it was returning us data. So exactly the same thing. SQLize is doing the same thing. I read Irina's definition on Saturday, which said ORM is a promise-based. SQLize is a promise-based ORM. Do you guys know why it is promise-based? What's the reason it says it's promise-based?
Whether it's asynchronous.
Because of the asynchronous. And how do you know that? Remember the then function. You guys, if you guys are being using SQLize from Saturday, there you call a function, SQLize functions such as find one, find all, create, and then there's a then function attached to it, right? This means that that is an async function. All right. So this is what it means that the SQLize is a promise-based system. It returns you a promise, not the data, right? Remember, when we looked at ORM, when we built our custom one, we were passing in a callback function eventually if we had to get the data back. This is the same concept for SQLize also. Okay, we don't have to create that function, we just have to pass it in. But behind the scenes, that's what SQLize is doing. You pass in a callback function, it makes a query to the database, gets the data, puts into that callback function, and returns you all the data. Okay. So just from the concept of what do you guys see the benefit of using SQLize? Anything different other, you don't have to write queries. What else? Is there a reason you would prefer SQLize versus actually writing queries? You would prefer?
Yeah, probably. It's a lot shorter.
Right.
It's more simple.
That's what exactly seems to me, that if I would have to choose, I would choose it because all I need is call a find all function or find one function, pass something in. Another benefit is, you should know how to write SQL queries, but if you're using SQLite, you don't really have to worry about it. You're like, okay, select star from this or insert. I don't have to worry about those queries. You can just call those functions and do it. Table creation. Remember when we used our ORM, or even before ORM, when we were using MySQL in Node.js, we were not able to create tables from our Node.js code. Remember, we were able to run all the queries. We used the connection.query function, creates all those tables, but we did not see how to create tables from our MySQL Node.js. But if you look at SQLize, we are able to create those tables from our code as well. You don't have to go into the database, create those tables. Only the database should be existing. Everything else you can create tables, drop tables, modify those tables that exist in your from your SQLize code. Okay. So does everybody has SQLize installed? Let me make a quick check, and I want everybody. If I type in SQLize, or you guys type in, do you see this? If you do not, this comes up if you did npm I -g, right? You have to have it globally installed. Again, kind of recapping, why do I have to install it globally? Anybody remember the reason local install versus global install? How do I tell this has to be globally installed? Anybody remember? Why can't I just do a local install, basically meaning npm I SQLize and start using it? Why do I have to have a global install? There's a difference between local and a global install npm packages. Anybody remember? What is it? Yes, all of them can use it, but what's the difference? Like, how do you tell that this has to be globally installed?
-G or -A.
Right. That's the installation part. Okay. But why do I have to globally install versus a local install? So, okay, if I do a local install, how do I use it? How do I use that package in my code? Require. I use a require. Okay. If I do a global install, you see this comes up over here. I can use it as a command line argument. That's the difference between your global and local install. If you do a global install, the reason is that I can use this in my command line argument just like this. I can have a SQLize and something. Remember, what do? I do a npm something. This means npm install globally. If I install any package that I need to use in my command line interface on my command prompt on my terminal in Mac, it has to be globally installed. The local install ones are the ones that you use a required keyword in your code. The global install are the ones that you're going to use on your terminal. Okay, that's the difference between global install and local install. What is it? The global install one, you don't need to do a require. No, the global install don't need a require. Local install need a require. That's the difference. Global install, the reason is so that I can use them on my terminal, command prompt, or whatever. Okay, that's the reason you would have to do a global install. If you do what? If you deploy somewhere where it does what?
I'm not sure they have it installed.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. If you do SQLize, that's the check. It should show up these things. Does it show up this thing? Or you can do a SQLize -- version. Any one of these will do. We haven't done anything yet, but this is what I was saying. I want to make sure I want to check and make sure that if I type in SQLize in your git bash or your command prompt or your terminal in Mac, either these help documents should show up or a version number, one of these, any one of them will do.
Mine says command not found.
If it says command not found, this means it's not installed. So you would have to do a npm I -g SQLize And then the second package is sequelize minus CLI. You need to have these two installed globally. If you are getting command not found, and again, for Windows, this should be on your git bash. Mac, there's only one terminal, so should be working.
What was the second one?
Sequelize dash CLI. CLI means command line interface. So these are the two npm packages that need to be installed globally. Yeah, just add a space and do it. Yeah, it should install both of them. Or you can do separately, it's up to you, but this command will install both in the same command. So sequelize and then sequelize CLI, those two packages should be installed. And once you have these installed, I'm using version 5.5.1 is the latest, if that's fine, but whatever gets installed, we'll just use this. And when you type in sequelize, you should see these commands, and we will look at two of these. Okay, does everybody has sequelize installed? They can see these commands. Are we waiting on someone? Everybody good? Okay. Kelly, is your working now? Okay. All right. So let's start with exercise number 7. It's same as 6, but it's kind of warm up. So I will do this one so that you guys can go back and do number 6. But it's very similar to 6. But this time we will do it. Okay. So everybody good? All right. So if you look at the README for number 6, they already mentioned what you need to install. All right. So what we have to do over here is, let's look at the code over here first. I have my config file. Okay. My config has my connection and an ORM. Does this mean I'm using sequelize? If I open this one and if I open this one, does this mean I'm using sequelize? No. Why? I'm using my custom ORM. I have this orm.js. Looks like it has these function get to dos, delete, and all those functions. Okay, and then there's a connection file. This means I'm making a connection to my database. Okay. Looking at these two, I can tell we are not using sequelize yet. Okay. Let's look at our packages. So I have these two. I think I stopped my database. Hold on. Let me make sure my database is running. Okay, that's better. I think I might have. Let's go back and see. This is, what database is this? To-do list. Let's do this. Drop database to-do list. I'm going to create it. And save. Fresh. Okay. So the first thing we will do is we will create our database that's mentioned in activity number 7. Okay. And this database is called to-do list. Okay, that's all. Just the database, no tables, nothing. Everything else we'll be creating from sequelize. Okay, so the first thing that we do, we need to convert this code into sequelize code. Okay, so for that, this config file, I don't need this config file. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Right, because if you're using sequelize, we shouldn't be using our custom ORM or anything such as that. Okay, let's go back to my package JSON. Since we are using SQLize, MySQL2 package kind of works with SQLize. I don't need MySQL package anymore. So I'm just going to be using MySQL package. Okay, MySQL2. Again, I'm not sure if you guys looked into it. MySQL2 is the next version or the second version of MySQL. It kind of works with SQLize. If you're using SQLize, you need MySQL2. Okay, MySQL2 has all the things that are inside MySQL package plus some more. So we don't have to use MySQL anymore. You can just start using MySQL2. It plays nicely with this package over here called SQLize. Okay. Other than that, I should have everything that I need to be installed. So we can go ahead and do a npm install, and this should install my Express, MySQL2, and SQLize. Okay. So that is what I will do. Open in terminal, npm I, and this should go ahead and install everything. Okay, so all of these are installed. Of course, it's not going to work because I just deleted the whole config folder, and we need to fix that. All right, let's look at our server.js. It's calling API route, so I don't have to make any changes over here. I don't think I need to make any changes here. Okay, so we'll close this out. We'll go back to our API routes. This line over here, it says requires ORM. I'm not using ORM anymore. I just deleted the whole folder. So this line is going to give an error, so we don't need this. I'm going to remove this line as well. Okay, all these functions, ORM.2, they don't make sense anymore since I'm not going to be using our custom ORM. So we can go ahead and delete these. At some later point, we'll fill these one out with our SQLize code, but for now, we don't need any of these. Okay, so these are removed from my API routes.js. Of course, I need something else. I need to include my SQLize code, but once I have completed those things, we'll come back and complete those part. Okay, so far so good. We haven't installed anything. We haven't used SQLize yet. All right, so the first part is we need to create this part, the configuration. Okay, we're going to use SQLize CLI, the one we just installed, and create a config, a default config. Okay, again, remember I deleted the config folder, but I do need some kind of configuration. I need the SQLize configuration. Okay, so we are going to use SQLize space init :config, and it should go ahead and create a config folder for you. Make sure you are inside your unsolved folder. So let me make sure am I in the correct folder. Of course I'm not. So let's go back to my correct folder. We are on 07. Okay, and unsolved. So I'm in my correct folder. All right. So what was the command? Let's take a look at it again. SQLize space init space no space :config. Okay, you can copy paste it. I'll just type it out for the first time. SQLize space init and then config. Okay, you will see a config folder being created by SQLize, and that's what we will go and take a look at it. Okay, now when you use SQLize, it will create a config.json. Open this up, and you will see it has all these configurations. Okay, now you will see different environments. We call them environments. This is configuration for the development environment. This is for the test environment. This is for the production environment. Now, who determines these environments? Any idea? Huh? Who knows which one to use? Who? What is it? So I'm saying that we have different environments over here, right? This is the configuration for development environment. That's it. This is the configuration for test environment. Okay, and that's all. And the last one is the configuration for production environment. Okay, but who knows about these environments? Yes.
You want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so the development software engineers, they develop the code,
Okay.
and then they're gonna push it to test, and then they're gonna go and they're going to test the code, see if bugs,
Right.
and then once it's bug-free, they're gonna push it to production, which is considered viable.
Okay. So would the database be different in each one of them, or it's going to be the same?
They should be different.
They should be different, yes. Okay. My test and development database should not be my production one, right? Because I don't want to be adding some production data in my test one, and I don't want my test one to be adding some production data. Okay, that's good. Now, when I in this code, how do I know which one do I need to use right now? Do I need development? Do I need test? Do I use production? Development. Why would that be development? Right. But the reason it is, if you see this host over here, what host is this? This is localhost. Okay. So when you are developing anything on your computer using localhost, we are on the development environment. Where would these come into play? When you deploy them to your Heroku or any cloud provider. Okay, Heroku, for now it's Heroku. Heroku has, they will have your, Heroku has its own database, it has its own host IP and all that stuff. So once you are deploying it to Heroku, you would be changing this or this. Okay, it probably would be the production one, because for now our Heroku, we are deploying all the code from our master branch. Okay, remember, if you deploy to Heroku, it says master Heroku or whatever, Heroku master push. So master branch always has your production code. Okay, so your Heroku database configuration, this is the part that you need to fill out eventually. Okay, I think Heroku gives a JAWS DB. That's what they call the database. They would give you their IP address or a host name. You will have a username and a password and a database. So you're going to fill out those information over here. Okay. For our localhost development, we are good with this one. Okay. Does everybody understand? When you deploy to Heroku, you'll have to make sure that these information are updated versus this one. Use development and test also for your localhost. Use a production one once you deploy it to your Heroku. Yes. So in our case, there's no difference. But in your production or in a company, development is, as Kelly was saying, for developers when you're coding and you're adding some data. Test is used by a QA team, a quality assurance team, and they have their own data set. They don't want developers to mess with their data set, so they keep it safeguarded, and that's the environment. Yeah. Okay. They don't have a good sense of humor like developers have, so they don't like the data set that we put in. So they have their own test environment, and they don't want us messing with their data set. That's the difference. Okay. All right. So since we are using development, let's go ahead and update root password for our local database, and password. And I updated this. I called it to-do list. I'm just going to copy my schema. Okay. So my database, username, password, host, you can put it localhost or 127.0.0.1 will also work. They both are same. Localhost or an IP address of this, both of them are good. Okay. Dialect, MySQL. SQLize works with SQL Server, MySQL, MariaDB, a lot more stuff. The flavor that we are using is MySQL, so that's why it comes by default with MySQL over here. Okay, so that's the only change you should be doing in your config.json. All right, next thing is we are going to create models. Okay, remember from our MVC, what is models? Anybody remember models from MVC? What does models refer to? Anything related to database. Anything related to database is considered in your models. Okay, so we will go ahead and create. Remember, our ORM also resides in the model part of the MVC. Okay, so since we don't have an ORM, we are using Sequelize. We are going to create a model. So the command is same thing, looks like it is Sequelize space init colon models. Okay, and then you should have a models folder over here, and that's all we should be using Sequelize for. Oh, the Sequelize CLI for. Okay, so we'll come back over here and we'll see there's a models folder. Okay, models folder has an index.js file. We'll talk about it in a minute, but this is, everybody should have this. Okay, any questions so far? Anybody stuck somewhere? Yes. Oh, it is Sequelize init colon models. It should be one, skip the migrations and the one at the this one below config. All right, everybody good? All right, so in our models folder, we are going to create a model that depicts, that reflects what our table is going to look like. Okay, so I have a database called to-do list. I'm going to create a table called to-do inside it. Okay, and inside my to-do, I'm going to have two columns. Let's see, what are the two columns? There is text and a boolean. A text would be string and a boolean type which says whether my task is complete or not. Okay, so instead of using writing SQL queries, we are going to use Sequelize and we are going to create that table. Okay, so any table creation, anything related to that, it should be inside your models folder. Okay, model relates to everything database. Your ORMs go in your models, your table configurations, your table creation, your table models, everything goes inside your models folder. Okay, so the first thing you will do is you'll create a JavaScript file. I like to keep the same name as the file name and my table name as same, but you can name anything you want. So I'm going to create a table called to do, so that's why I'm naming it todo.js. Okay. The next thing what you're going to do is we're going to export this new table. Let me type this out and then we'll talk about it. Okay, and we're going to export this as a function. All right, this is inside my models folder, and my function is going to have two parameters, Sequelize and data types. Okay. All right, now where is this coming from? This is kind of configuration that Sequelize is looking for. When you have a models folder, when you import models, Sequelize is saying that it's going to pass in, it's going to call your table, your model as a function, and it's going to pass in two parameters, Sequelize and data types. Okay, so this is why it is extremely necessary. We kind of follow the same pattern. Whenever you're trying to create a table, whenever you're trying to create a model that is using Sequelize, kind of follow this strategy. Inside your models folder, have your table name, whatever table you're creating, and then use module.export, a function, and then with these two parameters. Eventually, Sequelize is going to what we call inject or call this as a function and pass you these values inside this and inside this. Okay, your data types are all the data types that are available in Sequelize. String, boolean, I think it's integer or number, and few more. Okay, all of those data types, we can look at the documentation. Those are all available to you inside this parameter. Okay, now let's go ahead and complete this and then we'll come back and see if there are questions. So I'm going to create a variable to do, and I'm going to return this. Okay, same name as my table name. I'm going to use this argument that comes in sequelize. Okay, and dot function is called dot define. Okay, if you're defining your table, you have to use this function called define. Okay, with define you will put in the name of the table that you're trying to do, and next is your column names. For example, I'm going to create a column called text. Okay, and this is going to be of type string. Not text, it's text. Okay, and then I'm going to create a boolean called complete, which is going to tell me whether my task is complete or not. Okay, once I have this, since I'm exporting, this function should return something, and we'll go ahead and return to do. Okay, now the question arises, why do I have to do like this? Why is it I have to create a function, I have to pass in two arguments or two parameters called sequelize and data types? Why do I have to use define? Why do I have to a table name? Why is this so specific? Because what? Because sequelize is also an opinionated framework. Okay, sequelize is also an opinionated framework. They have defined something. So basically you are saying is sequelize is going to look inside your models folder, okay, and it's going to look for your table definition. Okay, we'll take a look at it. How does it find all that stuff? Okay, once it does, it's going to inject or pass in this thing and this thing. All right, this thing is going to have functions that are part of sequelize, such as define. Remember, MySQL npm package has a function called connection query, right? Connection.query and all that stuff. Similarly, sequelize has a function called sequelize.define, and it will create a table with these two columns. Okay, so every time you're creating a new table, make sure you follow this strategy. All right, create a function, two arguments, sequelize and data types. All right, then create your table name and return that. Okay, ID and all that. So we'll take a look at it in a minute and see what it actually does. So we are going to run this. If it is successful, we will go into our database and actually see what it did. What kind of table it created, columns, and see what's going on. Okay, but we will take a look at it. But this is how you would define your table. Okay, any questions on this? So if I have another table, I would go over here. I usually put the same name as my table name was over here, lowercase. Let's suppose you had a task table, so you would do task.js and then do module.exports. Same thing over here. I would create a task variable, return that, and then whatever column names I want, I'm going to put that over here. Okay? Any questions on this? Everybody understand how to create a table? Well, define a table. We haven't still created. We still have to do one more thing, but this is how you would create your table. Okay? All right. So let's go back and look at our, open up your server.js. And then let's go ahead and call our function that is going to start our sequelize connection. Okay, and this one you should have seen this on Saturday as well. Okay, so what do I need to do? I need to import this folder over here. Oh, where's my folder? I'm missing the folder. What am I missing? So let's go ahead and import our models folder, and let's do it over here. So we'll say const Just call it DB because this is my database, right? My models folder. Everything is related to database inside my models folder. Oops. Require and then import dot slash models. Okay. So we just imported our models folder. All right. And then the last thing we need to do is call this model. What was that? Questions? Huh? Ah, good question. I was going to ask you guys why just the folder. Why just the folder? Very good question. I'm just importing the folder, but you will see it imports everything within this folder. Why? Any idea? Huh? Because what? Right, but I'm just importing the folder. Why does it import everything within the folder? Ah, yes. The answer is because Node knows it. But why does Node know it? But yes, partially right. So Node.js, if you have, here's the trick. If you have an index.js file inside your node, it is going to export everything within it. The trick is you need to have, if you have an index.js file, it automatically imports that index.js file. Okay, if I have a models folder and within that any folder I have index.js file, I don't have to say dot slash slash import index.js. Okay, you don't have to do it. Why? If there is a file exactly called index.js, it automatically gets imported if you just import the folder. That's what. And this is the functionality built in inside Node. Remember that. Why do I have to do just this? Again, if I don't have an index.js file inside my models folder, it's not going to get imported. Okay. The only file that gets imported by default without actually specifying the file name is if there's a file called index.js, lowercase, just like this. Okay. Does that mean my todo.js is not getting imported? It's not. It's not getting imported. Again, Node.js only imports by default if there is an index.js file and you just say, hey, import dot slash models. Node is going to say, okay, there's an index.js and the intention is import index.js file. Okay, now if I want to import to-do, I have to manually say to-do.js and all that stuff because the only file that your Node.js is going to import is index.js by default. You don't have to specify it. So if you create a config folder and you have an index.js file over here and there's a code that you want it to run, you could just say dot slash config and Node.js is going to go into a config folder, look for index.js and automatically import it. Okay, is that clear? We'll come back to to-do, but is that clear? If there's an index.js inside your folder, you just have to put your folder name. You don't have to specify the file name. By default, this is equivalent of this thing. Okay, only if it is index.js. Yes, Simon. Yeah, but it won't do anything then. Right, yeah. You would generally put some code in your file called index.js because you're trying to do something. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Does everybody understand that index.js does not require to be specifically written? Your folder will automatically import index.js. Okay? Yes.
Will that be even if you have a different file structure? Like let's say
Yeah.
index.js resided in, I don't know, in the routes folder, for example.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So if there's an index.js in your config file, config folder, you just have to say dot slash config. Yeah. Okay? Everybody good? Now, Um, should I do this first? Okay, so let's complete the. Let me open my routes. So, it's going to be done here, but we'll come back to it. Okay, now I'm importing my models folder, so it's going to import automatically index.js, but you will see I'm not going to import to-do.js. But do I need to do? I do need this file. Why? Because it has some code. I need this to run. How is it going to run this code? Any idea? I'm not going to import it. You will never see a import for to do. But still, I do need this code. How is this going to be accessed? Function, yes. But how do I tell my server.js? I already told that there's a models folder you need to import. Okay. Sync it, yes. I'm going to sync, but how does your sync know where your files are? All right. So look at this. You have your models folder, and by default, this file get imported, and everything within this file is going to get executed. Okay. Pretty sure nobody has actually opened this file, but if you open this file, there's a lot of code. Okay. This is the code which is saying, hey, go inside models folder and look for any file that is over there and import it. That's what's going on. I mean, if you look at the code, it actually looks for, it does some parsing. It looks for all the files other than index.js that are inside this folder, and it is saying, hey, go ahead and kind of import those. Okay, I mean, the code is all here, but basically what it is saying is we need to import all the files that are inside this folder. Again, how does it work? I'm only importing my models folder. What does models folder do? It goes ahead and imports index.js, right, by default. When it imports index.js, in turn, index.js has the code which says, hey, look for all the table definition, all the files that are inside this folder, and go ahead and import those files. Okay, so there's no Node.js magic happening over here. The only thing Node.js is doing is importing index.js. If you open up index.js, it has the code over here that SQLite has put in nicely for us that actually loops through all the files inside that folder and kind of imports them. Okay, and how did I get this code inside my index.js? How did I get this? Yes, when we did init models. Remember when we did SQLite init models, it automatically created a models folder. Within that models folder, it automatically created index.js with this code. And what is this code doing? It is saying, hey, go inside my models folder and import anything other than index.js so that I can create those tables eventually. Okay, and how do I import index.js? By this part over here, and Node.js automatically knows, finds index.js and imports it. Okay. Again, I don't know. I find it really fascinating, and I like to learn that. Okay, why is it working, and how is it working? Most of the time, you will see that people are. I mean, some understand, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is how it works." But I like to explain because I went through it, I studied it, and I was like, "Hey, how is this working? Why is this? Why don't I have to do slash to do and still works? Why don't I have to mention my table names?" And the reason is because there's already some code over here and how the Node.js works. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Index, guessing the object and the object that key is referring to one of the SQLite object?
So in the
The object dot key, like what is that object?
oh, this object, this is a global class in Node.js. It's not yeah, it's not SQLized. It's, if you look up object in Node.js, there's a global class called objects. That's what it is doing. It's not SQLize. It's more like it's part of your Node.js. That's what this is. Okay, and you are passing in this object, so it kind of pulls all the keys from this object. Okay. All right. So last part, as Kelly mentioned, we need to sync so that it creates our database. So go ahead and write this command for sync. It's going to be db dot sequelize dot sync. Okay, and since it returns a promise, then function. All right. So what is sync going to do when it runs? Is going to go ahead and create your databases, tables, and whatever you're looking for. Okay. Once this is complete, what do I need to do? I need to call my express. And why do I need to do this inside the then function? Should be clear now. Why do I need to call my express inside my then function of the sequelize? What is my intention? Why am I saying do this here? Why can't I do it outside? Because it is asynchronous. So what is my intention when I put my express code inside the then function? What am I saying? It has to happen before. The database creation has to happen before my server starts up listening for requests. Okay? So my express part has to be done after my database has been created successfully, then only go ahead and start my server. If it does not happen, do not start my server. I won't be able to do anything. Okay? If I don't have my tables created, if I don't have my data, everything done, do not go ahead and start my server, because if my database is not up, it doesn't make sense. I mean, that's my app. I won't be able to do anything, so there's no reason to do this outside. Okay, does everybody understand that? This is the reason we are putting this inside, because I need my database created first, and then my server has to start. Okay, now if you go ahead and start this, it should start successfully. There shouldn't be any issues. I mean, we haven't completed this part, and we'll complete it in the next activity. We have to complete our app.get, post, and these are empty, so these should still work. Put is different. I think I updated, so make sure you pull the new activities that are later on. For now, this will work. Okay, so let's go ahead and ls everything good, nodemon server starting successful. All right, create. You see this query? So this is the query that your sequelize is running. So now if you open up your MySQL workbench, go to this table, you should see this table created inside your database. To-do list, tables. Okay, so I have a text complete. What are these two? Where are these coming from? SQLite. So what are the three default columns that SQLite is adding? ID, created ad, and updated ad. Okay, and SQLite follows some general standards. The reason for these two columns are these are called like audit trails. These are required when you have when you are working at some place and something happens. They have a way. We have a way. Developers have a way to go back and see when was this row created or who updated this row. Right now, these are date columns. If you look at if you open up your to-dos columns, you will see these are actually the data type is dates. How do I see? If you do a table inspector, go into your columns. You see that updated, this is date time, this is date time, so this is going to accept a date and a time. So generally in your production systems, you want these to be filled out. The reason is that it kind of creates an audit trail, and then you can go back and see when this data was created and when was this updated, okay? Right now we don't see a point, but eventually you will see that it is important that we have a complete audit trail. Usually, other than these two columns, we have a user ID also, which is created by and updated by. It has the exact username of the person who created this row and who updated this row last. Okay, kind of creates an audit trail. Something happens, not to blame anybody, it's just to go back and see who was responsible for that or who did something, so that we can go back and say, hey, what were you doing? Why do we have this data? What's the importance of that data? Okay, so SQLize by default creates these two. And then the ID, again, this is the by default column that is created. It is automatically auto-generated. All right, integer cannot be nullable. Can we change the name and all that stuff? Yes, we can. We'll take a look at it in the next few classes. Well, actually, this on Thursday. For now, what we need to understand is the table name exactly the same that you have over here. All right, if you go back to your models folder, this matches the name that you have, to-dos. Okay, the two columns that you have, text and complete, case sensitive, exactly the same. And then you have then ID column and then created at. Okay, let me go back. Any questions? Was everybody able to complete this part? Your tables are created? No? Is it giving error? What is the error? Okay, let's do this. It's 7:30. Let's take a break. We'll come back at 7:45. The next part, you guys will be working on the functions that you must have looked at last time. Find and all. Meanwhile, if people who have issues creating this, stay back. I'll go through. We'll work with them. Make sure these tables are created. Okay, 7:45. All right, Raymond. What's the error? Yes.
So I'm having issues
With what?
when I'm trying to log in onto JS.
Okay.
It's like saying,
Did you install Node on Global? npm I nodemon -g. Yes.
Oh, it's kind of around the same.
So the database has been created. Yeah.
So he's had nothing, he wasn't able to do it with nodemon either, but he's like, nothing seems to be installing globally. But at least when he tries to run global, it doesn't install and it's not recognized. So like nodemon does not, if we try to run nodemon, that command, no command is not recognized. Same thing with SQLize. I had to do that for installing globally. It's saying not recognized. So what's wrong with like these things with the app? That file that halfway wasn't added or something. It should actually. No.
do it way differently.
Okay. How do you do
I
that?
do Week12 -2
And that's what I sent you, but you said so. So if you type in SQL so let's do so you see there's already error, so it's not stopped.
This was before. This is after he's been before it was just saying.
Oh,
And so I sent him. This is a different one than what I sent him. Right? Yeah. So pull up the one that I sent. So this, because he was initially having it with no none, but then if you scroll down, like it was saying this, right? Prefix is not a path variable. So then you tried this doing this stuff, right?
yeah.
And now he's getting all these new errors. So I don't know if we now the path is incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you look at the error, install, okay, so how about that? Remove those,
That's where like, and then like gets my brain going. How those workouts that
I've seen like your path, like you can add on to the
yeah, but I don't know if maybe something got over. So it might be for the bathroom. Go ahead. Oh, you have to do it in the
It says command
run it as Yeah, that's just to keep it in the culture.
This year, 5 generations of families.
So yeah,
Like the rivers, like
Let's try go to the C user. Yeah. So you're kind of going to
their side is still washed away.
do a sign.
Basically, it's like any little bit of water and shit. Last winter, the river flooded. Jet skis in the front yard. I live next to a basin, so.
But you want to set it to the prefix that you think that's it, right? Like, because so what they're saying, we wanted to run, we got the prefix and then he added the prefix to the tower. Now your prefix was different, right? Your prefix is showing as this. So is that what we should use? The water into the program files get user because I think that's what they're saying. It's like, so the first step, figure out where the path is coming from. And then for him, it was this. But for Andrew, he got this back.
It should be.
So that's driving this.
It's so crazy. So I was watching every video I watched.
Yeah.
It's like it's just like there's these dudes driving this fast line. Pretty sure it's one like that. And they're just
You wanna use it?
water. They just drives and they're still producing like freaking water that's different place and everything. They're just
And I don't know what that's stuff.
obviously no current in them. They're wash away. Yeah, well, it's pretty like full. I think it's.
Yeah, you just need more water.
Oh, no, no.
So it just seals up. Buddies and drive stuff you connect the wall, the drive to the wall. He had a kid built the four-wheel drive truck going across the river. That's what was ahead. And then he had that hanging out the side of his hood. He didn't have a hood on. Oh, he was just trying to be funny. Let's see if he had like a 65-inch tractor tires on his Chevy truck. So he didn't get any place. It just was funny. He just drove over the side of his table. That's what's more cool.
Oh.
That's how you guys.
Yes.
I was waiting to ask you about
That's only instructor configuration. Yeah, you missed it out, man. Should have stayed back on Saturdays on lunch.
I thought you were here. You said that you were one of the ones.
I don't know, maybe.
It's called
I don't retain everything. I was kind of spacing out.
it's called MySQL by Jun Han. This one.
MySQL Jun Han.
Jun Han, this one, yeah.
And then you just like right click on the files? Or?
Oh, you have to set your database, and he has the
Uh-huh.
command over here. So the only thing you will have to do after installation, you will have to set your localhost, and then then you can right click and do whatever you want. New
Right.
query. Yeah. But first you will have to set this, and it's pretty straightforward. He walks you through how to create this localhost connection. Click the plus button, and you should be able to type in the host, localhost, username, password, port, and should be able to do that. All right, before we begin the next set of activities, any question on setting the previous one up? Was everybody able to set it up and running? Except Andrew. I think he is having issues, but we'll take a look. Yes. Well, what's the issue? Is there any error? What's the error? Do you have your database set up?
Yeah, I said only database.
Right. So even before you set it, I asked, did you set up your database?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So remember, you have to set up the database. SQLite will create the tables for you, but you have to have the database. And remember, in your config, you are mentioning what database. Make sure you have this set up as well. In your config, remember, what did I do? I updated the database name, root, password, but make sure this exists. And your activity already has the SQL schema for creating this database. So just run this and it should be good. All right, so take a look at activity number 8. Okay, we have set it up. Everything should be running. Our models are there. Our table is there. Now we need to create our CRUD operations. Create, read, update, and delete using Sequelize. Okay? So in this activity, number 8, you are going to complete the first 3 only. Okay? You will see an API for to-dos. What should this return? Who said HTML? This is an API, right? It does not return HTML. It returns JSON, right? And what does it? What should it return? JSON and then what? What? Collection. Thank you very much. All right. It's going to be an array. So you need to return an array. All right. And what is a function in Sequelize that you use to return a collection or an array? What is it? Find all. All right. So for everything, you're going to use the find all function. Did you guys did this on Saturday, right? Find all. What? Ethan, where's Ethan? I need to ask Ethan. I don't trust you guys.
I remember it.
You did?
We had just
Okay. That's okay. But so you're going to use the find all function. Okay. Again, take a look at the find all function. It's pretty straightforward. For the second one, what does the second one should return? A JSON and then what? Just one. Thank you. All right. So what is the function? It's called find one. So in Sequelize, you're going to use the find one function. The last one for your post, it should be creating data. So what is a function that you use in Sequelize? Create. Just create. Okay. So complete these 2 functions and then I will code them out later on, but I want you guys to complete these 2 functions. Then we will take a look at delete and update. Okay, so find all, find one, and create. But before that, make sure you have your server running even before you start coding. Michael, did your database setup complete? It's working now? Okay. Okay, if your database is not there, it's not going to work. So let's make sure my config, I'm going to update my config here. Since this is a new activity, it doesn't have the user the password. So this is good. I'm going to install my express route is there, models folder is there, Sequelize sync is good. My package should only have MySQL 2 and Express. That's good. So I'm going to install npm I. Okay. And then if I run this, I'll run it separately. This is activity number 8. Okay, node mon node mon. Okay, so everything looks good. Database is there, tables are there. Okay. So make sure everything is set up before you start coding this one out. You should get something like this, successful messages, your server should be running. And then go ahead and use the find all function and then find one. So our functions are part of the tables. Okay. So the tables that you created, those go before these functions. Right now we just have one table. So these are part of these this table. And how do you access this table from your Node.js? You are importing over here, so you need to use this db, your table name, and then the function. Remember, this is all promise space, so your then function is going to come at the end. So remember there is a whole HTML behind this also. So if you run this, you can run all your commands from the UI as well. It has a view and all the index HTML and everything. You don't have to modify any of the JavaScript on the front end. But if you want to see for creation what you are getting an object. So based on that, you can complete. So once it is done, you should be able to see rows from your database on the HTML. You don't have to modify any of the HTML, but I would look at view.js just to see what is coming from the front end. For example, for the post one, I'm getting an object, text and complete. So based on that, you can kind of complete this part. So the first one that returns everything from your database. Right now I don't have anything, so it's going to return nothing. But the first one was the find all method, right? So this is part of your db dot sequelize. Oops, db dot table name to do. Okay, and then the function is find all. Since find all is a promise based, it's an async method. I need to have the then function, which is going to have my data. Okay, so this is the function that you need to use in the first one. db dot table name, which is your model name, which is to do. Remember, this is how I'm importing. If you go back to your models and then you go back to your to do, it's importing in uppercase this fashion. Okay, so I'm using the same one, dot find all, and then my then function. Okay, my then function is going to have the data that comes back, so it's going to be function, callback function, and then let's call it data. Okay, and then once I have this data, I'm going to return this as a JSON. So response dot JSON, and then my data. Okay, right now there's nothing in the database, but let's check our console to make sure there's no errors. Oh, looks like there is an error. Let's see. Okay, failed to load empty response. So I'm not getting anything bad. That's why it's complaining. So let's copy this. Let's run our API. Oops. No, localhost 80 slash API slash to do's. Okay, so it returns me an empty with no errors. So this is all good. Okay, any questions on the first one? Find all method, yes. Right, those are you need it. In this case, I'm not passing anything, so it's kind of optional. You can put it over here. The reason they are there is to remind you that if there's a condition you need to put in, it has to go within the curly braces. That's why they're there. You can put it over here. You can skip it. For find all, in this scenario, I don't need any conditions, so that's why I skipped it. Okay, because what am I saying? I'm saying give me everything back from my database. So in both cases, this will work. But you do need them in your find one function. So similarly like this, come up with the find one, and you need these options. Why do we need this? Because we need to specify, I'm looking for one row, but what is my condition? What should be that row? And that should match this ID over here. Okay, so you will say where ID is equal to this thing. How do you pull this out from your request? How do we get this ID back? huh? Reg.params, it's part of your URL parameters. Okay, the ID is in your URL. That's why you need to use reg.params.id. Okay, those rules haven't changed, so they are still the same. So you will say db.todo. Oops. Okay, and we are using find one, so find one dot then, because this is an async method. All right, I'm going to put this in a new line so that's a little bit nicer. Okay, now this will find, let's complete our then function because that's a little bit easier. So function returns data, and I'm just going to give back respond with this data. Okay, so my find one, it needs a condition, and what is a condition? Where. Okay, and then what should be, what am I trying to match? I'm trying to match the IDs. Okay, so the ID column in my database should be equal to the ID that is coming back over here. Okay, so the first property, this has to match exactly what the column is in your database. In the database, the column is called ID. Okay, and what should it match to? This ID that you're passing in the URL. So it's going to be rec.params.id. Okay, so find one is always going to give you one row back from your database. This is you're adding condition that what that row should be. Okay, once you have completed, once you have some data, see if you remove this and see what happens. It will still return you one row, but it will probably just return you the first one that it comes across. Okay, this one we are making sure it only returns you the ID that you're looking for, which is this one. Okay, so in your these curly braces, one of the properties that go inside it is the conditions. For example, the where clause. We can put more conditions such as greater than, less than. They have a lot more options. We can look at the documentation. For the basic one, this is where your conditions go in, inside your curly braces over here. Okay, so right now there's still no data. If I run this, nothing should happen. So we'll come back once we complete the create one, put some to-dos, and then you should be able to see, run your APIs, and you will be getting some data back. So if I run this /API /to-dos, okay, nothing comes back. If you put any ID 404, because the ID doesn't exist, so you'll have to complete the post one, the create route, and then from the UI you can insert some tasks and to-dos, and they should show up on your, start showing up over here. Okay, what about the create function? Anybody complete the create? 3, 3, 4. Okay, so it's going to be db dot table name, okay, dot create, okay, and then dot then, this stub them out, right? Again, it's an async function, you need the then function. Okay, now remember, this is going to be your model or your table name that you have created. At some point next class, we are going to have more than one tables, more than one models, and we are going to be running these queries based on which table I'm trying to run. So this means I'm saying that create some rows in my to-do table. Okay, when you have more than one, you're going to say that table name over here is going to create rows for only those tables. All right, so let's complete this one. Then function is going to be same as the previous one, should give you back some data and then send that data back to your other JSON. So function data, and then just say response.json data. Okay, now what goes in my create? Same thing, curly braces, and then I need to mention what I'm trying to insert. What am I trying to insert? I'm trying to insert an object, right? From my front end, what is it coming? If you look at your front end view.js, you will see there's an AJAX call for post to this route, which is good. And then they're passing in this object. Okay, so you're getting this object. Now, where is this object coming in? How do I pull this object out from my request? How do I pull this data out from my request? In the body, okay? So reg dot body. Can I do this? So remember, I need to give an object in my create, right? So those are the curly braces for. But if you look at your view.js, this is coming as an object, okay? An object with two properties, text and complete. So I think you can directly pass in this object and you should be able to create it. Let's give it a try. If it does not, then we'll pull each one individually out. Okay, so to run this, let's go back over here. Say create my first to do. Okay, that worked. All right. So you see the UI is that as soon as it creates, it makes a get all request and sends this back. Okay. Let's create a few more. Okay. Okay. So these are all my tasks. Now, if I go back to my APIs, just to verify, if I call my to-dos, I'm getting 3 of these back. I have IDs 1, 2, and 3. I can access them by ID. So if I say 3, it should return me a single object, okay, with this ID. You can change this to 1, comes back, but your UI should be working like this. Okay. Any questions? Was everybody able to complete these 3 requests before moving on? Any questions on this? No questions? Okay, no questions? Sure. All right, so the next 2 are update and delete. Okay, from the UI, it looks like if you press this, it should call the delete function. Again, the JavaScript for the front end is done. You don't have to worry about it, but take a look at it and see what you're getting back. When you click this, it updates the variable called, in your database, you should have a column called create, right? So it goes ahead and, complete. It goes ahead and changes complete to true. And then on a UI, I think it shows like a slashed out thing like this is done. Okay, right now it's not functional. What we have to do is you have to come here and then update your delete and your put. Oh no, why is my put like this? So you have 2 options. Either you can work on the same one, but you'll have to modify a little bit. I thought I updated this. Let's look at our Vue.js and let's look at our put request. Okay, so there's a single issue. If you're using the same file, okay, not the next activity, all you need to do is, if you look at your Vue.js, there's a put request. It's giving you an ID in the URL and data. So you need to add /.id and then complete this. Okay, I think I updated in the next one. I didn't update in this activity. Again, if you're using the same one, make sure this is how your route should be looking like. Okay, so delete an ID and then put also an ID. Okay, so the function, let's complete this one first. Okay, Anybody knows what is a method in SQLize for deleting? Destroy. Okay, it's called destroy. I know people really like this function name. It's called destroy. So look at the documentation, see how do we use destroy. Very similar to the get one. Okay, find one, sorry. But the method that you're going to use is called destroy. And then for update, anybody know what's for update? Update is update, not as dramatic. Okay, so complete the destroy and update. Look at the documentation. Very similar to find one, and then we'll complete this in a few minutes. Destroy and update. So complete this delete first, then run the UI. Make sure if you press X, this should go. This should be deleted from your database, and then we'll take a look at put in a bit.
Yeah, because it was on the this one? Yeah, it did.
The page should show up when you run when you run this. When you run your server, it should show up like this, and you can add a task. Well, actually, yeah. So if you're done with the destroy, take a look at update. It's similar. See if you can figure out update. I mean, just remember the conditions for the put one. Where is the data coming in your put request? You can. Yes.
Remember off the top of your head where the reset password and what and MySQL workbench?
It's in administration. On the left tab, it says schemas. Oh, well, you have to log in. Yeah, you have to go inside it. Okay, on the top left, you will see schemas. Click the administration. Okay, and then user privileges, and then update the password for your root. You have to select the root. Select root. Select root. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
away.
Oh,
I just had
nice.
to open up set the .env variables and go into
Oh.
path there and add it as an environmental variable,
Oh,
that
okay.
pathway, and then
Oh.
it worked.
Oh, I'm glad
Because
it
like
worked.
we went and looked in the folder,
Uh-huh.
and it was there. There was Sequelize, there was NodeMon, they were there. It just wasn't recognizing the path.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
Well, I'm
just
glad
set
it worked.
the environmental variables that way.
Nice.
So,
Nice. Yeah, I
I was
was
glad. I was
I
like,
had I was Googling for Windows,
right.
and I was like, okay.
I know, because
I'm glad.
I could tell that's what they were saying to do, and then I was like, but what they said in Stack Overflow is not working.
Yeah.
So then I was just like, how do you add append to the path in Windows 10? You know,
Right.
and it's like simple thing popped up. It's like, okay.
All right. Is the delete working? Did you guys get the delete working or destroy? So it's similar to find one. So it's going to be db dot table name or the model name, and the function is destroy. Okay. Async function. So I need the then function. All right. Let's complete the then function and return callback. Okay. And then some data and just return this. Okay. Now destroy or delete, it has to be based on the ID, right? You're trying to delete one particular one. So similar to find one, it's going to be a where condition. You will have an ID. And for delete, where do we get the ID from? Request.params, all right? URL parameters. Come back here, where clause, object, column name is called ID. And then let's go ahead and do rec.params.id. Okay, now if you go back to your UI and press the X, it should go ahead and delete this, and there it is. Okay, you can run your APIs just to make sure your first ID has been deleted, and so on and so forth. All right, any questions on the destroy? All right, any questions on the previous ones? Let's start from the top. Find all, get on a single one, post or create, and then we did the destroy. Any questions on the previous ones or the current one before we move on to the update one? No questions? Does everybody has this working? The first 1, 2, 3, 4 routes? Okay. All right, what about the update one? Where am I getting the data for update? What is it? In the body? That's it? Oh.
I did it all in the body.
Right, you can do it. You can do anything. You can use a post route to do the same thing. But we'll follow good standards and basic practices. Where does update usually get the data? Body and params. And what is in the params? The ID. Why? Because you're saying, hey, get this data from the body. It has to be updated with this ID. Any ID that corresponds to that, do it. Some of your solutions won't have this ID, but please trust me, this is how you do an update APIs. I write APIs day in and day out. This is how you do an update. Your ID should be in your URL params and your data should be in the body. Okay? And in your, if you look at your JavaScript, you're passing in the ID, and then your body tag has that same object, what you're trying to update. Okay, looks like the only thing that updated is going to be your complete because it puts a dash through it. Okay, so the function is called update. So db dot your table, your model name dot update. Okay, and then dot then function. Okay, then function, same thing for now. We'll just return a callback function with data and then return this as a JSON. Okay, because that's my API route. API route should be returning something in a JSON. Okay. Now, for my update, I need two pieces of information. The first is going to be the ID, and then the object that I'm trying to update. Okay. So I'm going to have two parameters. The first one is the data. So it's coming in the body, same as your create or post is going to be red dot body. Okay. And the second is the condition. All right, just like your get request over here. Okay, so remember, put or update is a combination of your kind of like your create and your get one. Okay, create because you're pulling the data from the body, and get one because you're putting a condition for the ID, just like this. Okay, so this gives me the data, and the second one is going to be the condition, which is going to be where ID is rec.params.id. Okay, so two pieces of information. Let's see if this looks better. Okay, so update two pieces of information. The first one is going to be the data that you're trying to update, and that data is in the body. And the second is just like your get request, the ID. So you're trying to update this information where the ID is equal to this one. Okay, so if you look back to our front end, I'm getting to do. This is going to be an object and whatever gets updated. Okay, now if you go back here and let's see. Okay, so this shows me that the update is working, but it puts a dash which says it's done. Now if you go back to your database and run this query, remember right now it says 0, 0, 0, and this means false. Right now if I run this, my first row should be gone because I deleted in the previous activity, and my eat dinner row should have 1 over here now. So if I run this select query again, and my first row is gone and the second one is updated because it's completed. Okay, this shows that my update is working, my delete is working, create when you add something, and then the fact that these rows are coming, it means my get or my find all is working. Okay, all right, any questions on any of those? Again, this is I'm spending too much time on this one because from here on, right now we just have one table. We just have these routes. On Thursday, we'll have more than one table. Then we will be looking at joins and all that stuff. Okay, so this thing will have to be, remember, you guys should be able to do all these routes comfortably before we move on to the join and relationships and more than one tables. Okay, so right now I know it's challenging, but it's still relatively simpler before we move on to the third stone. Right now we just have one table. We are doing our get all, get, create, update, and delete requests. Okay, and these are the basic functions that we use. All right, Thursday we're going to look at more than one tables, right? Because the fact is you are not going to have just one table in your database. You're going to have more than one. Okay, so we need to learn how do we create more than one tables in SQLize. How do we join those tables? How do we create relationship between those tables? Okay, so it is important that everybody is clear how these routes are being created. So the thing is, instead of writing SQL queries, we have replaced with SQLize functions. Okay, but behind the scenes, if you look at your log, you will see that these are the queries that are being executed every time you run. So your select query, same thing, right? So behind the scenes, SQLize is taking all the data and creating these queries for you. So your update is the same update, table name, set, ID, where text is this and complete this is this. Okay. Looks like it's all also updating your created and an update also with your current information. That's cool. It kind of identifies when it was created and then when it was updated automatically. It's probably pulling the current time and updating. Okay, let's get back here. All right, so any questions before we move on to the last one and look at some other functionality that SQLize provide? No questions? Everybody understand the folder structure, how the structure is, what does model contains, why models is able to pull everything out even though you're just importing the models folder, okay? But it's able to pull everything from here. I don't have to import to-do or index.js specifically, okay? And in my API routes, let's go back on the top. Okay, I'm just using models and then why does it require, oh, because it's inside this folder. Okay, everybody understand in your server.js why does this has to go inside? Okay, it has to be inside. Your server should only start listening once your database and everything is created. Okay, any questions before we move on to the last part? Okay. All right, so the last part is for today is validations. Remember in your columns when we were creating our SQL tables, we had not null, default, and all those constraints or validations. The same thing is in your SQLize as well. Okay, so for this one, for at least few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, I want you to look at the documentation and figure out how would you add validations. Okay, go to your SQLize, look into model definition, and then there is a subsection called validations. Okay, take a look at it and see how would you add some of these validations. Now, what validation that you need to add? This is activity number 10. You don't have to use that exact same one. You can look at the README file and see what validations are being asked for you to add. Okay, and then you can still keep working on this file over here. Okay, the one you have already created these routes, it will be easier for this one. But make sure you go to exercise number 10 and look at the README file and see what validations are being asked. Let's go back here, look at the README file. Okay. All right. So what you need is, you need number 4. Just look at number 4. So you need to add a flag to prevent the text field from being null. So like not null. And then you need to make sure that the text field is between 1 and 140 characters. These are the 2 validations that you need to add. Okay, the hint is already there, so you'll have to modify this file. All right, so 2 validations. It should not be null, and then it should be between 1 and 140 characters. Okay, look at this validations over here and see which 2 do you need. Now how would you get those 2 out? Okay, don't worry about the class and models in this part. Okay, this works with what we have as well, but you will have to change the way we have defined our columns. Okay, if you see the bar word over here, this is the name of the column. Okay, the way we have it is a little bit different. This is also the correct syntax, but we are defining it a little bit differently. We have our table name, which is okay. Our column names are just like one, oops, are one object, this thing. So this is not going to work if you're trying to add some more properties such as validation. So you'll have to change this a bit. Okay, you don't have to worry about this. This is all good. You have to change these lines over here. Okay, and for this, see how they are defining these things. Okay, so take a look at this, spend some time. I want you to spend 10-15 minutes trying to figure out how would you add two validations to our columns over here. Okay, once you have those validation, see if you can figure out if it works. Just to verify, go back in your database. You can go back to your database over here in your workbench. If you right click on your tables to do table, you can see a table inspector option, and this should have some of those validations shown up over here. For now, the text says yes, it can have null values. We are trying to change that. Right now it's varchar 255. I'm not sure what will show up, so this should be modified once you have your validations added to your table. Okay, so the text should be not null and should have between 1 and 140 characters. You can reduce the range, test it out. You can say it should be between 1 and 10, and this way, if you enter more than 10 characters over here, it shouldn't be inserting. So that's a quick check instead of 140. If you want to validate that your validations are working. Should give you some kind of an error. So take a look at it, what error is. Most probably you will see the error in your console over here where your server is running. See if you can modify your table. Even when you have your validation, there's something extra you need to do. I'm not sure if you will be able to figure out, but you need to basically recreate your table from Sequelize. Okay, so spend some time, see if you can figure out how to add validation and make sure those are working. It's the validations over here are pretty well defined. Not null, is null, length. For the complete flag, see if you can put a default value as false. Um, Yes.
So,
Some bar. Yeah.
and then you would like to grab the ID from the command line. And the solution is right under the body. But then on the JavaScript side of the page you have to add that in, you add that into the route.
Yeah, I mean, it probably does. I'll replay it.
But it's still just the polling ID on that route is the
Yes. Yes. That's how it should be. So in your view.js, um, in my view.js for the put route, I have to do ID. And it's updated in the unsolved one since I think you put the solution.
So it's not just a slash ID.
Yeah,
That's the object. Right. That's what's in the or like
Put an ID is
on the server side.
this is the content.
Because since that is since the last two into the specific
How do you what? Did you search in the documentation? There it is. What do you mean? Should be working. Huh? Not zero, false.
So if I say no, it's going to interpret as false.
No, default value is false. No, this is the example of what they are saying, but you have to do default value false. I'm saying that this is the tag you need to use and then you put in whatever you want. Right, that's a different issue, but that's how you use the default value.
What is this look like? So, oh, would it be the new?
Anyone got the validation working? Nobody got a single validation? You got it? Huh? Issue with the syntax? There was. Um, did you fix that? Okay. So is it working?
Well, it works if I input something like it about it wasn't before.
Oh, okay. Which one did you implement? Huh?
The allow null and the validate.
Okay. Uh-huh. I mean, it says 1 to 140. You can reduce it just to test it out and see if it works. Is it working? So for validation, do you guys know which file do you have to modify? To do JavaScript, yes. That's the one that has to be modified only. So if you read the documentation, how many types of validations are there? No, not a lot. Like parent, how have they classified the validations? So SQLize has classified the validations in how many parts? Huh? One, two, what? Three? Three or two?
Three.
Three. What are those three?
For attribute validation,
Uh-huh.
for attribute validation,
I think those are like more type within the within the validations. So basically, there are two validations: custom validators or built-in validators. If you look at the look at the validations, the first subheading. So it looks like SQLize has two type of validation: custom and built-in. Okay. The difference is the custom validations are coming from they're using this validator.javascript library. If you look at it, there's a whole code and everything. So they're using this for custom validations. So somebody who has this library, they are importing this in their code. And all these are custom validations. Okay, these are coming from this file over here. That's what they're saying. So any validation that you add using the validate object, these are considered custom validators. Okay, but basically this means that these are not native, these are not part of SQLize, they are using this library to bring on those validations. But otherwise, SQLize itself has some built-in validations, okay, and those are the ones that are going to be outside this object. Okay, some of those, if you scroll down, you will see allow null. Okay, this is outside the validated object. This means that this is a built-in SQLize validation. Okay. So basically, there are two types of validations: SQLize, custom, and built-in. How do you identify? If you have a validate object, within that you have all these validations. This means these are all custom validations, right? And the reason they're calling it custom is because they're using a third-party library. That's what they're saying. Okay, this is not natively part of SQLize. I mean, you don't have to worry about it, but just as an information, if you want to understand what the difference is. Okay, there are several built-in. One of them is allow now. And how do you identify those validation? They exist outside this validated object. That's how you identify. Okay, these are the ones that reside outside the custom validation. There's one called allow now. The second one is called default. Okay, if you look at the default value, this is also built in. Again, why? Because it's not part of this validated object. Okay. Again, next question is, I'm not sure if you read through even the starting one. What is the difference between the built-in and the custom validation, other than one is not part of native SQLize? Did you guys see any difference between the custom and the built-in? Right, because I already explained, yeah, that's the difference. Other than, what's the functionality difference between the two? Okay. For example, there is a built-in functionality, built-in validation called allow now. Does everybody understand that? Allow now. Can you use this in your exercise right now?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. You can use this. But if you look at your validation over here, your custom validation, there's a property over here too. Not now true. Can you use this? You can use this also. Then why would I use this and not that? What's the difference between the two? What is it? Well, you don't need the library. This library they are saying that they're using, but when you install SQLize, you already are getting this library. So you don't have to worry about that. So you don't have to install anything extra. This is already built in. It's actually, the reason is in their documentation. So the difference is the built-in ones get executed first, and as soon as they are not validated, the code stops, throws an error, nothing else is going to be validated. Okay, if you're using their built-in validation, as soon as the first one fails, your code is going to stop and going to give an error, and it's not going to do anything else. It's not going to execute any of your custom validations. Okay, for example, if you have allow now built in and then you have a custom validation, if this validation fails, none of your custom validations are going to execute. Okay, that's the difference. So it's going to stop execution and it's not going to go ahead. For your custom validations, if you have more than one, it's going to go through each validation and it's going to say, oh, this one failed, this one passed, this one passed, this one failed, this one failed, this one passed. It's going to go through each one of them and notify you. It's not going to break on the first one and say, oh, the first one failed, I'm not going to go ahead anymore. It's going to execute the first one, then the second one, then the third one, then the fourth one, and verify each one of them. Okay, that's the difference. So your custom validation is going to go through each validation that you have mentioned. Your built-in one, as soon as the first one fails, is going to stop. And that's why you will see allow now is usually your built-in functionality, because right now it says, if I say allow null is false, that's what I need to do, right? I'm saying that my column should not have any nulls. All right. If I put it over here, as soon as this fails, none of this matters. I don't care if the length is 5 or 10, right? I mean, it's null. I want it to stop over there. So that's why usually you will see allow null is outside, the built-in one is used, because you need to stop the execution over here. You don't need further custom validation because everything else is redundant. right? Because I'm saying my columns should not allow null. As soon as somebody tells null, none of them matters. I mean, the length is not going, length is going to be 0, right? Because I'm setting a null. That's why you will see these built-in ones are used. Same with the default one. Default value is a, it's not kind of validation, it's just setting a default value. So that's why it's actually not even part of the validation. Default value is outside it. Okay, so these are some of the things I summarized from the documentation, but I would recommend, take notes what I said, go back to the documentation and read and see how I translated those two things. Okay, all of these things I just read the documentation and I'm telling you from the documentation. Okay, maybe in easier words, but take notes and see how do you read the documentation and complete that. Okay, so let's see how do we add those validations. So this syntax is not going to work, and what I prefer is what they have over here for each one. For example, they have where's my, they put the column name as an object, and then they have all these properties. Okay, from now on in the future exercises you will see me not doing this, but instead of each column as an object and then defining each one of them. Okay, for what I mean is that the first one is good because I need this object, and then within them I'm going to have my text column and then some properties, right? And the next one was my complete column and then some properties for each one. Okay, so let's bring back our, the first is our data types is going to be data types dot string, correct? Same thing over here. This is going to be data types dot boolean. Okay. Then allow null. So we were saying that the text property allow null should be false, right? I don't want nulls to be going inside the text over here. This one doesn't matter, but what I need is by default value. So the property is default value, and I want all of them to be false. Okay, so these are my built-in validation. Now if I want to add the length validation, there's no built-in, so I need to use the custom validation, and we can use this one, length. Okay, so if you're using custom, it has to be inside the object called validate. Okay, and all your custom validations are going to be over here. So the one that I'm trying to do is length, and it should be between 1 and 140. That's too big, so let's make a short one so we can test it out. So my validation is that my text should be 2 and less than 10. Okay, both are inclusive, but we will test it out and to make sure. All right, any questions? Okay, so from now in next activities on Thursday, you will see me making columns in this fashion. It's much easier because you have a lot more things that you can add. Of course, we are going to have validations and all that stuff. So get into the habit of making your columns in this fashion. Okay, now if I go back to my server, which is already running, okay, let's see if this validation works. Let me just restart to make sure. Okay, so I can add a task test functionality. So I am getting an error. Validation on length failed. You guys see that? Right, because my range was 2 and 10 characters, and it stopped and it didn't do anything after that. So let's go back over here and say test. This should work. Why? Because it qualifies between those two things. Okay. All right. Any questions on the validation? Then you have a lot more validations before I finish. Yes. Okay. All right. So there's one more thing I want to tell you. If you go back to your, oh yeah, this is an interesting one. I'm not sure. Did anybody notice what am I defining my model name over here as? What is my model or table name? To do. But if you look at your database, what's the table name that it created? To do's. Um, what did I have like? It should be to do's. Where's the space? There's a space between to and do, and you don't have a space over here. Ah, that's interesting. Okay. So what is this? Again, as I said, SQL is an opinionated framework. What they're saying is any model name that you created, they're going to add an as, make it plural. Okay. Even if you add something over here, they're going to by default add an s or whatever the plural form is. It's pretty good. For example, if plural form for a word takes an es, they do add es. I think it's if you try like party, I think they will update it to parties. Okay, but the intention is that your table name is not going to be the one that you are putting it over here. Okay, I don't know about you guys. I kind of don't like this because I'm saying, hey, this is the table name that I want. Okay, so I want exactly this. I don't want SQLite telling me this is how I should be naming. But I mean, for my standard, this is pretty good, and I like naming my tables like this. So again, this is all extra. If you scroll down to your model definition, let's look at the configuration. Okay, so they're saying if you don't want that, you can use this property over here, free stable name, and it's going to only create the table name that you are telling it to do it. Okay, so for example, if I add my property, so this has to be an object, I guess now. Yeah, so instead of this, I have to change this to another object, and I'm going to say model name. Okay, same thing. And I don't want it to do anything, so I'm going to say freeze. What is it? Freeze table name. Freeze table name to true. Okay, so now if you go ahead and create your table, you will see that it should be to do instead of to do's. All right, if you want to make sure that the model name that you're defining, okay, which is also the table name, the model name should be exactly your table should be created with the same name. You would use freeze table name. Again, this is something extra. I mean, I've used it before, and I want to be transparent, as in like, okay, this is my model name. It should be one-on-one. But if you're fine with the SQLize approach, you don't have to use freeze table name or anything. Okay. The only thing is, if I go back here, you see my app is crashing, and the reason is it's not able to. It's kind of getting confused. It's trying to read to-dos. Okay, it's expecting a table name to do, but it's finding to-dos. It's getting all confused and all. Okay, so the fix for this is if you go back to your server.js, and this is a little bit dangerous. Just make sure over here in your sync function. Let me go back here, show you the documentation that I'm not making this up. If you go back to your home, getting started, scroll down to the sync option. Okay, you will see that there's a flag called force true. What this does is every time you stop your server and restart your server, is going to delete the whole table and recreate it. Okay, It's dangerous. The reason dangerous is anytime you make any changes to your database, it's going to be deleted and recreated. So basically my server restarted right now. Oh, it's still crashing. Let's see. Okay. So what doesn't it like? String dot lowercase. Let's see. Force true. Let's go back to my database. Let's see. Refresh. Let's go back here. It's probably this thing. Model name, no typo, freeze table name. Let's go back here, make sure I don't have any typos. Model definition, configuration, model name, to do, freeze. Oh, that's true. It's calling to-dos. Well, no, front end doesn't know anything about the tables, so that should be okay. It's and I'm returning this, so this should be good too. I think it's the way there's some syntax issue in the define function. I wonder if the column names go inside the uh, inside the models. Let's see. Do they? I don't think this should be correct, but let's try it. Oops. Let's see. Yeah, the model name should be out. Still should be outside. Okay, let's get back to. Let's see if this is working. Yes. Okay. So if I come back over here, you will see everything is deleted. So I'll figure out. I think there's some syntax issue. It has to be an object. Right, that's what I had. I had an object over here. What do I do? Okay. And then model name as. What do I have to do? Freeze table name.
Like you're saying to leave the.
Oh, I see. So you're saying keep this, and then add another object, and over here add freeze freeze table name as true. Okay. Is that good? All right, let's see. Oh, it's still crashing. It worked. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's working. It's my queries are not working, but my table name is. If I go back there and refresh, you will see it change to. It should have changed to to-dos. Well, actually, it's not creating. So you have the exact same thing to do. Fees table name true. After these. Oh yeah, I don't think that should matter. Yeah, these at the end. I think they should still be okay. What do you take it on? Oh, now it's working. Oh, interesting. Well, you need force to, otherwise it's not going to refresh or it's not going to recreate the table. There it is. Recreate it too. So yeah, so it's in a different object. Thank you very much. All right. So this is the validations. Please make sure go back and at least complete these ones, because on Thursday we're going to be looking at more than one tables and joining them, making relationship, and then pulling the data out of those tables. Okay. All right. I'll see you guys on Thursday.